I do believe we have a
Yes, we do.
quorum. Madam Secretary, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a City Planning Commission review session. Today is Monday, March 28th, 2016, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is the proposed acquisition of property to facilitate the continued operation of the Mitchell Linden Public Library in Queens. And our presenter is Debbie Carney, Deputy Director of the Queens Office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The first application is an application for a site acquisition to facilitate the continued operation of the Mitchell Linden Library in Queens Community District 7. It's located in an R5D district just north of downtown Flushing. It's sandwiched in between a district to the east that is an R2A, and an R2 district permitting only single family, and to the south, west, and north zoning that permits general types of housing, for the most part multifamily types of housing. You can see that further to the west is College Point Corporate Park on the other side of the Whitestone Expressway. This is a land use map. You can see the site, it's sort of hatched, located at the corner of 32nd Avenue and Union Street. The surrounding, you see the surrounding uses are primarily 1 and 2 family, single family in the R2A, and as you move into the R5D and the R6, these are multifamily developments. There are quite a few community facilities. Just to the north is a public school and a playground. And this is the site. It's a 5-story condominium building. The library has space on the first floor, and it has 7 of the condo units. The Mitchell Linden branch moved into this site in 2012. The Queensboro Public Library acquired the site in 2011. They have 8,800 square feet on the ground floor. It's a library that benefits approximately 150,000 people yearly with its services, lending of books, videos, technology devices. It also benefits about 12,000 people when you're speaking about special programs such as in early literacy, after school, and general education. City ownership of the libraries comports with the 1907 agreement between the Queensboro Public Library and the city, which provides the title to the library property in Queens that is part of the free library system that shall remain in the city. So Queensboro Public Library agrees to administer the libraries in the Queens, and the city agrees to pay for the maintenance and the support. This is a long-standing model. Acquisition of this property by the library system was done with the intention of selling it to the city in the future. This acquisition would help reduce the operating costs of the library and enhance the efficiency of obtaining capital funds from the city for renovations, maintenance, and improvements.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes,
Mr. Knuckles?
thank you. So does the, in this case, the Queens Public Library, are they a part, would they be a part of the co-op board?
They
And
are-
they would,
Well, they're a co-applicant in this, but
Right.
you mean in the condo?
yeah, in the condo board, I mean, yes.
You know, I would assume that would become the city. Currently, the Queensboro Public Library is the owner of these condos, so I don't know.
Okay.
But that's a
No, I'm just
question that I
trying to-
can reach out
How do
and
they
ask.
interact with the rest of the condo owners is my question.
Well, they've been there for now,
What?
They've been there for, since 2012.
Right,
so the only thing that's really transferring here is the library, the fee is now going to be owned by the city instead of the library.
instead of the
So-
library.
So
Okay.
I assume when the library represents the city on the condo board or condo association, or some intrepid city worker goes out there,
Right.
him or herself, to deal with crazy condo owners.
You didn't mean that, of course.
I didn't mean it. Well, I have no idea who these
Right.
condo owners are. I just, just make a general statement
Sure,
about condos.
of course, you're
Condo
joking.
boards.
All right.
Any other questions for Debbie? We'll find out. Ms. Levin?
Yes, Debbie, this, question about this one and the next one that you're about to present. But, so when the Queens Public Library sets about acquiring a piece of property or a property interest for this purpose, as they did so long ago, is there a consultation with the city before they embark on that? No, because they're acquiring it knowing that eventually they want to transfer it to the city under the old agreement?
You know, I don't have the answer to that question. I can reach out.
Oh, we'll find out in the public review process. I'm just
Yeah.
sort of curious what coordination there is for taking on new property commitments and then passing them along to the city. And the prior location on Union Street what's happening there? And is that city-owned in any respect?
The prior location, a location that they were at since '62, I believe, it fell into disrepair. And the owner wanted to tear the property down.
Okay, because it was a standalone, single-story, just a library thing, right? Or maybe that's the other one.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not quite sure, but I believe that building was in disrepair. And the owner wanted to demolish and build a new. And so they were forced to find a new home.
Okay, but the city doesn't have an ownership interest in that prior site?
No.
We're not looking at development
Privately
potential?
owned.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron?
I'm just confused about how this works. If the library is fully funded by the city, how does the library save money if they transfer ownership over to the city? In other words, isn't it the same thing?
Well, not quite. I mean, the library has some private funds as well as public funds. It does do its own fundraising, but presumably by the city owning the facility, then maintenance costs and the like, which might be on the library's operating budget, goes on the city's operating budget. But I think that, again, that's a question that should be asked of the library when it comes back to us.
Not to say that I don't think this
I mean,
is a
not that
very
it
good
wouldn't
thing. I'm just
necessarily
trying to
be a
figure
war.
out what the
Right.
dynamic
I think
is.
that's a good question, and I think generally these questions about what the relationship is, and to Commissioner Levin's question about how is the library authorized to buy the site in the first place, are, given the preponderance of funding that comes from the city, not the vast majority of funding that comes from the city, are questions to be asked. Any other question about this? Hearing none, certified.
So Debbie also has the next project, very similar action, proposed acquisition of property to facilitate the continued operation of the library, this time in Rosedale. We're on item number 2, page 7.
This also is a site acquisition for property in Queens Community District 13 in Rosedale, in southeast Queens. This is a zoning map basically showing the zoning. It's a low-density area. It's an R32. It's got a commercial overlay on it. And the properties surrounding it are zoned for 1 and 2 families, and that's pretty much what's reflected in this area. There again, you have a land use map. The property is located, it's shown by hatching. Here it is. And it's, here it is, okay. And it's located at 145th and 243rd Street. There's a photo of the library. This is a standalone library, 1 story, approximately 4,500 square feet. They've been in this location, the Rosedale branch, since 1962, but the property owner wanted to sell the property in 2012. The Rosedale branch had the opportunity to acquire it, and so it did in 2012. It's a smaller library than the one in Flushing, and it benefits approximately 80,000 people every year with its services, and approximately 5,400 with its special programs. Again, they would also like to be in city ownership. in order to reduce the operating costs of the library and enhance the efficiency of obtaining the capital funds from the city for renovations, maintenance, and improvements.
Any questions about Rosedale Library? Mr. Marin?
Debbie, good afternoon. Thank you. Good morning, actually. Good afternoon. Question, what are the, what's the total development right buildable on this parcel? Do you know?
Oh, on the Rosedale, this is an R32, so it's a 1 FAR with that commercial.
So it's built out, maxed out?
It may not be, because they have this small parking area in the back.
Okay,
So they might be able to do a little more. But, yeah.
okay, thank you.
So I guess the city acquires those rights as well. Any other questions about this? I think probably the same questions that Commissioners Levin and Efron raised with respect to Mitchell Linden are present here as well. And so when the Queens Public Library testifies, and perhaps DCAS as well, we will hopefully get the answers to those questions. But until then, this is certified and will go out to the community board. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. Let's now advance to item number 3, page 13. Commissioners, I'd like to introduce Scott Solomon, who's making his very first presentation today. The project involves a proposed zoning map and zoning text amendments to establish a mixed-use district in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Queens and to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area to facilitate over 200 units of affordable housing. We're on item number 3, page 13, Barnett Avenue rezoning. And Scott, you're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chairman Weisbrod. The applicant Phipps Houses seeks approval of a zoning map amendment and related zoning text amendments to facilitate the development of a new 7 to 10-story, 220-unit, mixed-use, predominantly residential building. At 5025 Barnett Avenue, the development site is located within Sunnyside, Queens, in Community District 2. The proposed zoning map amendment would rezone the development site from N11 to Special Mixed-Use District MX17, with M11 and R6 components. The proposed Special Mixed-Use District would be mapped to include the entire development site. The proposed zoning text amendments include establishment of the development site as a mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH designated area, to establish that R6 zoning districts within MIH areas receive a maximum floor area bonus of, floor area to 3.6, to establish MX17, M11, R6, and to modify height and setback regulations in MX17. As proposed, 100% of the floor area would be affordable, including 20% of the units to be affordable to households earning up to 50% of the area median income, or AMI, 30% of units of households for households earning up to 100% AMI, and 50% of units for households earning up to 130% AMI. This proposal will comply with the requirements of option 2 of the MIH program, requiring 30% of units affordable permanently affordable to households earning an average of 80% of the AMI. 5025 Barnett Avenue is located on the north side of Barnett, between 50th and 52nd Street, with the Long Island Railroad right-of-way to the immediate north. These photos on the top left shows looking on Barnett east with the development frontage on the left. The photo 2 to the right is the intersection of 52nd Barnett, looking towards property across the street from the development site. And the third photo on the bottom is on the development site looking east on the current lot. The development site bought by Phipps Houses in 1950 currently consists of an existing 223-space service commercial parking lot. The zoning lot has 64,000 square feet of lot area. The only structure in the development site is an approximately 200 square foot parking attendant booth. The development site is long and narrow with an east-west orientation along Barnett Avenue, extends 560 feet on Barnett, and is 60 feet wide on its western edge and 150 feet deep on its eastern edge. Current zoning rules permit a maximum floor area of about 64,000 square feet, utilizing the 1.0 maximum manufacturing or commercial FAR, Community facility uses with a maximum FAR of 2.4 would be allowed up to 154,000 square feet. Back to the area map here. The surrounding neighborhood is characterized by a mix of land uses, including residential, industrial, commercial, transportation, and open space. Residential uses are located primarily to the south of Barnett Avenue. It consists of large apartment buildings with elevators, smaller multifamily walk-up buildings, and 1- and 2-family buildings, houses. Other apartment buildings, larger ones ranging in height from 6 to 11 stories, are located on blocks to the southeast of the development site, along 52nd Street, south and south of 39th Avenue. More specifically, if you look, it might be easier for everybody, point here, tax block 1238 is a collection of buildings. It's arranged with 10 to 12 stories, has an FAR of 3.64 to 4.66. The Sunnyside Gardens development, a planned community of 2-story attached townhouses with shared courtyards constructed in the 1920s, is located to the southwest development site on the blocks west of 50th Street and south of 39th Avenue. The applicant has been operating the Sunnyside Gardens apartments directly across the street from the development site since those buildings were constructed in the 1930s. The complex consists of 4 to 6-story brick buildings arranged around an interior courtyard. Clusters of smaller retail businesses are located in the ground floors of residential buildings on 39th Avenue and Woodside Avenue. The only open space in the surrounding area is the Sunnyside Gardens Park, a 3.5-acre private park owned by a local community organization. The Sunnyside Planned Community Preservation District is mapped to the south and west of the development site, and the surrounding area also includes a portion of the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. The development site is well served by public transportation. On this map, you will see these green highlighted lines. These represent local bus routes in the neighborhood. The local bus routes, we have the Q104, which traverses around 48th Street, and the Q18 on 58th Street. Additional bus lines navigate along Northern Boulevard to the north and along Roosevelt Avenue to the south. Access by subway is available on the 7 line along Roosevelt Avenue, and the nearest station indicated by the pointer is the 52nd Street station. The E, M, and R lines run to the north of the development site along Broadway, and the nearest stop is the Northern Boulevard station. Both stations are approximately 10-minute walk from the development site. The blocks south of Barnett Avenue are zoned for residential use with R4 and R5B districts. R4 districts allow all types of housing, including 1- and 2-family homes, as well as apartment buildings, with a maximum FAR of 0.75 and a allowance for the attic of up to 20% additional floor area. R5B is a contextual district that allows a maximum FAR of 1.35, a maximum street wall height of 30 feet, and a maximum building height of 33 feet. The existing M11 permits commercial, light manufacturing, some community facility uses. The permitted FAR for commercial manufacturing use is 1.0 and 2.4 for community facilities. The maximum permitted height of the front wall is 30 feet, and the maximum building height is governed by a sky exposure plane rising at a rate of 1 to 1. Here we have 2 renderings of the proposed building. On the top, you're looking south from the southwest. On the bottom, you're looking towards the western side of the project with Barnett Avenue situated in the center of the image. In terms of the proposed project, it would comprise of a mixed-use building again with 220 affordable units, 101 parking spaces, and a new universal pre-K facility. The proposed project would develop approximately 237,000 gross square feet of floor area, including 232,000 gross square feet of residential space and approximately 4,800 gross square feet of community facility space. In sum, the proposed project would be built to a 3.6 FAR. The building will rise to initial height varying from 70 to 80 feet at the portions closest to Barnett Avenue, and would step up to a maximum of 90 feet and 100 feet in the rear. 100 feet at its maximum. To orientate the commission on these site plans right here, we have Barnett Avenue, 50th Street, 52nd Street. Across the street is the apartment buildings across the street. The 7 to 8-story portions of the building along Barnett would be set back from the sidewalk at a distance ranging from 7.5 feet to 11 feet 11 inches. The 10-story central portion of the building would be set back from the sidewalk, ranging from 21 feet 4 inches, 21 feet 2 inches, to 24 feet and 10 inches, creating a small courtyard around the entrance near the residential lobby. The building would occupy approximately 446 feet of lot frontage. The ground floor would include the residential lobby and maisonette apartments with small front yards facing along Barnett Avenue. The western edge of the ground floor would include the 4,800 square foot UPK facility. And the UPK facility is expected to be operated by Phipps Neighborhood, is the social services affiliate of Phipps Houses. The proposed building would include 101 accessory parking spaces located at Reade on the northern part of the development. And at the side of and also at the rear of the building, underneath a portion of the building where the second floor of the structure would be supported on columns with open parking at grade beneath, as you can see here and right down here. There will be 2 curb cuts leading to driveways for vehicular access to the parking lot, one on the eastern edge here and one on the western edge there. The project with 220 affordable units will represent a significant expansion of affordable housing to the surrounding area. To further expand the opportunity for affordable housing to the existing Sunnyside residents, the applicant has requested that the 30% affordable option 2, under the mandatory inclusionary housing program be applied. By utilizing option 2, 30% of the project's residential floor area would be required to be permanently affordable and available to families earning up to 80% of AMI, or approximately $46,000. The remaining units would be affordable to moderate income households earning up to 130% AMI, which is approximately $93,000. In terms of the requested actions, on the left we have a map of the current zoning map, on the right the proposed zoning map. The requested action would result in the rezoning of the development site from an M11 district to a special mixed-use district, MX17, with M11 and R6 components. The proposed special mixed-use district, in conjunction with the proposed text amendments, would allow for residential, light manufacturing, limited commercial, and community facility uses. The maximum residential FAR would be 3.6. For community facilities, the maximum FAR would be 4.8. Commercial industrial uses would have a maximum FAR of 1.0. The maximum base height proposed is 85 feet, with a maximum building height of 110 feet. There would be no off-street parking requirements associated with residential and community facility uses. For commercial and manufacturing uses, off-street parking requirements vary depending on use, bulk, and number of employees. The applicant proposes a special mixed-use district to maximize the amount of affordable housing that can be built here. Under the existing M11 zoning, an as-of-right building could be developed with about 64,000 square feet of floor area for commercial industrial use, or 309,000 square feet of community facility space with the 4.8 FAR. Regarding the proposed text amendments, first, an amendment to ZR Section 23-154 to establish R6 zoning districts within MIH designated areas, an FAR of 3.6. Amendment to ZR Section 123-63, establishing the new mixed-use district, MX17, as an inclusionary housing district whose floor area ratio would be governed by R6 regulations. Amendment to ZR Section 123-662 to modify height and setback regulations to MX17 to allow portions of the building in R6 district within 15 feet of a narrow street to rise up to a maximum height of 85 feet. Amendment to ZR Section 12390 to add text that would establish the development site as special mixed-use district MX17. And finally, a text amendment to Appendix F to add the entire development site to the list and maps of MIH areas. The development site will be the only place in the city where an R6 district is located in an MIH area. Any future development would require discretionary action in order to achieve the same FAR that this development would receive. For the applicant, the proposed text amendments are necessary to allow for an efficiently designed building form and to incentivize affordable housing. Designing the project areas in MIH area and establishing R6 districts within an MIH area with a 3.6 FAR are needed to ensure that the project, as proposed, may not be constructed without a substantial affordable housing component. The proposed adjustment to the height and setback regulations in MX17 will provide enough depth to accommodate a double-loaded corridor on all but the uppermost floors. If the building were to comply with the current requirement, a maximum of 60 feet of height within 15 feet of Barnett Avenue, floors above the sixth floor indicated by the hatching on this drawing would not be able to have double loaded corridors and could cut the amount of units down by approximately 15 dwelling units. Due to the long, narrow configuration of the development site, the building, per the applicant, must have a long street frontage, and the proposed text amendments allow the design to visually break up the long facade into smaller components. In summary, these actions would facilitate the development of 220 affordable units, 30% of which would be permanently affordable, including 101 parking spaces and a 4,800 square foot community facility space for Sunnyside residents.
Thank you, Scott. Questions? Mr. Cantor and then Ms. Deluz.
Good morning, Scott, for the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Question, oh, you have that slide. What's on this side of the street?
Right here,
What's on the side, on one side you've got the Sunnyside Yard, right?
you got Sunnyside Yards, the Long Island Railroad right-of-way,
Right.
and then over here we have the Sunnyside Gardens apartment complex.
How tall are they?
4 to 6 stories. The portion facing the development side is 4 stories.
How long is the completed project?
Completed project?
How long is it? In other words, what's the street wall looking at?
It's approximately 440 440 feet. I mean, I can pull that right up here again.
About 2.5 blocks.
It's about 2 blocks. The apartment complex here is also 2 blocks, but
The existing?
across the street are 2 blocks. But the exact number, if you allow, I can pull up the exact number. It's 446 feet of lot frontage.
But is the articulation that we see, is that proposed?
This is the proposed.
And is that going to be built in one shot?
Yes, 1 building, 1 structure.
Are there special provisions with regard to Sunnyside Yard traffic?
The rail yard,
Yeah,
as to,
noise mitigation, vibration, I don't know.
yes, the zoning resolution 12332 says that you have to maintain at least 45 decibels interior in the wall. So you have to, you have to provide 35 dBA attenuation, and they will be doing so. They have to.
They'll have air conditioning?
In addition to the wall attenuation, they have to provide an alternate means of ventilation.
Ms. Deluz.
Hi, Scott, welcome.
Thank you.
Do you happen to know what the AMI is in the neighborhood?
I don't have it offhand, but I can provide that.
Okay, I'm just curious as to whether or not 80% of AMI is getting close to market in that particular area. So that's a question I have. And the other is
I'm sorry, when you say local, you mean
community board.
community board? Okay.
And then on the 100, how many parking spots get 101?
Be 101 parking spaces.
And is that what's required?
There's
Is it
zero.
more than what's required?
It's much, yeah, 0 would be required.
Uh-huh,
It's replacing a 223 space lot. but
right,
It's going to be including 101 accessory parking spaces.
okay. And the 223 space lot now is really serving the property across the street primarily, or?
It's providing to area residents and area employees. The applicant believes that although it's 101 spaces, if it is attendant parking, it could be up to 199 spaces.
Okay. I guess that's something to be reviewed. And then, can you just talk a little bit more about the green space available to the residents of the property? It seems a little bit limited.
Are you speaking towards this little space here?
Well, there was that's really for the pre-K, right?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no additional,
So there's no outdoor space really for the residents besides the setbacks that you were talking about that were
Yes.
7.5 to 11
oh,
feet?
sure. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
frontage is going to have individual front yards for the maisonette apartments,
Okay,
going across the entire frontage.
for the maisonette apartments? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And there will be a, let's see, over here. So there you have the entryway here, but individually, there's maisonette apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Knuckles, then Mr. Marin.
Thank you. I just had a question about text. Under ZR 12363, it says text would be added to establish the new mixed-use district, MX 17, parentheses, district as an inclusionary housing district. Should that be mandatory inclusionary?
The title of that is inclusionary, but it falls underneath mandatory inclusionary housing.
It is an MIH district.
Right.
In fact,
All inclusionary is mandatory.
Right.
No.
No, it is, the text, inclusionary housing is the area in the zoning text where mandatory house, inclusionary housing is put. It's a subset of inclusionary housing. So that's correct.
All right.
Mr. Marin.
Scott, welcome. I got a question following up on the question that Commissioner De La Uz asked. She asked about open space, and we pointed to the front, to the space in front of the buildings at the Maisonettes. What is the space in the back that's depicted in green and seems to have tables and chairs in the back there?
Right here?
Yes.
That's all parking, that's parking.
No, right in the center, right there.
I believe that's on top of one of the raised floors.
So is that accessible to the tenants?
I could find out.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
The applicant mentioned, thank you, sir, and good presentation. The applicant mentioned that the 70% would be affordable at different rates. For how long will that be affordable?
30% will be permanent.
Right, but the other 70%?
It's based on the term sheet from HPD, so I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Right, but just wondering.
Ms. Levin.
Scott, welcome to our merry band here. Also following up on Commissioner Deluz's question about the 223 parking spots currently available, is there a plan for where they're going to be absorbed in the neighborhood?
Well, the building's going to provide 101.
Yeah, but they're all going to get moved out during construction.
There is no plan to provide.
Is there parking in the surroundings? Where are they going to go?
I could find where there are
Well,
locations.
maybe we'll hear about it when it
Sure.
comes back.
I think you'll hear about it.
So I'm figuring, I'm looking for a little, like,
I think it's
early
it's
indication.
a good assumption that you'll hear about it.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding this? If not, certified. Thank you, Scott.
Let's now go to item number 4, page 35, proposed zoning map amendment from R5B to R6B to facilitate residential development on Astoria, Queens. And our presenter is Joy Chen. We're on item number 4, page 35.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. This is a private rezoning application by 3070 Astoria LLC, which is seeking a zoning map change on a portion of Block 869, including 8 tax lots on 38th Street between 31st and 30th Avenue in Astoria, Queens, Community District 1. This proposed action would change the zoning on this block 869, which is currently split between an R5B and an R6B zoning district, to better align the R6B and to pull the R6B district to cover both the applicant's property as well as 8 tax lots on block 869 in Astoria, Queens. Currently, this block is zoned in 4 different zoning districts. So in 2010, the Astoria rezoning rezoned much of this area from R5 and R6 zoning districts to contextual zoning districts to better reflect the existing development patterns in the area, as well as to facilitate more moderate residential development and commercial development along wide streets such as 31st Avenue and Steinway Street, with access to better transit. However, at the time, these tax lots are great. Here, let's see. You can see on this map that the lots on block 869, half of these lots are greater than a depth of 100 feet, so they're 140 feet long, and the applicants are requesting a zoning change so that instead of having R5B mapped on half of their tax lots 75 and 76, all of these lots would, the zoning boundary for R6B would be extended to cover these lots to better reflect the existing depth of the lots and to facilitate the development of a new 5-story residential building with 26 dwelling units and 13 parking spaces. This area is very mixed use. It's very residential in character. On 38th Street, there is some existing multifamily walk-up buildings that are 4 stories in height, as well as 1 and 2 family buildings in the mid-blocks where the depths are pretty shallow. And this is a view of 38th Street, just so that you can see the residential nature of the block, and it is changing. In 2005, you have new residential multifamily buildings built, such as this, that are adjacent to the development site. So this is on the existing property of the applicants. They own lot 75 and 76. They're proposing, as a result of this proposed rezoning from an R5B district to an R6B district, to build a bigger apartment building that would have a maximum FAR of 2 in the R6B district, where today they only have a 1.35 FAR for the R5B district. There is a supermarket on the corner of 31st Avenue, which is an associate supermarket. And this is a rendering of the proposed development, which would, this building, which would be 5 stories, and it would be in between existing multifamily apartments that were built in 2005. The combined lot area of lots 75 and 76, which the applicant owns, is approximately 8,800 square feet under the existing R5B zoning today, which is 1.35. The total square footage of the development area would be 11,853. Under the proposed R6B zoning, which is a 2.0 maximum FAR, the maximum development area would be approximately 17,500 square feet. The applicants are proposing a 17,500 square feet a new building, and the assembled development site would not need to apply the new MI8, the new mandatory inclusionary housing, because increasing the bump up to 2.2 with inclusionary would bring the square footage to a total of 19,316. This is below the proposed threshold of 25,000 square feet. And for an action of this type, which is basically extending the R6B zoning district over less than 2,000 square feet of the applicant's site, it's a pretty small change, so the increment is small. The overall action would increase the total permitted residential floor area to less than 2,000 square feet. So that the 26 dwelling units proposed by the applicant would not need to apply the MIH requirements. In conclusion, this proposed zoning change from an R5B to an R6B district on a portion of Block 869 would better align the zoning district boundary to cover the full extent of these tax lots and reflect the actual dimensions and the depth of the lots, which are greater than 100 feet. They're 140 feet, and it would help facilitate the development of this new 5-story residential building. Thank you.
Questions for Joy? Ms. Levin and then Mr. Cantor.
Joyce, nice to see you again. It's been a long time since
Yeah.
we've had you here. In fact, maybe when we were talking about Astoria. No, you've been back since then. The extra depth of these tax lots, is that something that the staff considered in the Astoria rezoning, and was there a particular reason that we chose to map these with what is essentially now a split lot condition? Or is this something, that was a huge rezoning with a whole
Right.
bunch of lots in it. Is it something that just got overlooked?
Yeah, it was a huge rezoning. It rezoned, I think, like 300,
A lot,
a
a
lot
lot of lots.
A lot of lots. And so the standard was at the time to just draw the line in the central line of the block to really try to capture, in general, the character. Most of these lots down the center line would be even, but this was a very unique condition on a very unique lot. So, at the time it might have been not realize that it was, because it's very little, very minor, like you can.
Okay, yeah, so I guess my question is, was it intentional? Did we look at the long lots and say, oh, well, you know what, we're doing a straight line anyway?
Yeah.
Or did we just sort of not realize that we were creating a split lot condition?
I think it might have just been not realized because it was so small of a difference in depth.
And one more question, if I may. Has there been new construction along that frontage
On 38th?
since, on 38th, that could have taken advantage of this zoning change had it happened to them before?
Actually, not really. There hasn't been any new development
Okay.
because, again,
There
the lots are
are no new
split.
buildings on 38th
38th.
between the applicant's property and the corner?
No, but
Okay.
that's why they're really requesting the slight bump, slight increase from an R5B to an R6B, because that would make, they said, a lot of difference, because then they can really redevelop and use more of that bulk on the back of their property.
But there's nobody else who just put up a new building and dealt with the split lot
No.
condition who's going to come back and say, but wait a minute.
Not that, no,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cantor?
Thank you. Joy, the slide you put up before showing the quote infill buildings, could
Oh,
you bring
yeah.
that up? Yeah,
Oh,
those existing buildings, the white one and the one to the left and to the right of it, are existing, correct?
yes, they're existing. They were built in 2005. They were multifamily apartment buildings, built under the R6. At the time before the Astoria rezoning, it was an R6 zoning district.
Is property owner of those buildings is not the applicant?
No,
Do they have any air rights left?
no, they're overbuilt under, they're like over 2 FAR.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Joy? Okay,
Thank you.
hearing none, certified.
Thanks, Joy. I'd like to introduce Hannah Peters, yet another new member of the Department of City Planning staff. Hannah's from the Bronx office. She's making her very first presentation on the proposed zoning text amendment to permit indirectly illuminated signs in Community District 5 on commercial infill sites within the Grand Concourse Special Preservation District. So this is Hannah's first presentation. We're on item number 5, page 49.
All right, good afternoon. So as Jackie said, it's a proposed text amendment by the applicant, which is 1775 Grand Concourse LLC, to allow indirectly illuminated signs on the street frontage of specific commercial infill sites within the Special Grand Concourse Preservation District in Bronx Community District 5. On the zoning map to the right here, the area we're really looking at is the Grand Concourse between the Cross Bronx, which is the southern border, and then Fordham Road, which is the northern border. Okay, so the northern area up here, closer to Fordham Road, is zone C44. There's the occasional C14 overlay, but the majority of the corridor is zoned R8. The area is very well connected to mass transit. We have the B and D subway lines, which run along the Grand Concourse. It's also got several bus lines. And the entire project area lies within the Special Grand Concourse Preservation District. So the district was established in 1989 to preserve the residential qualities and the unique character of the Grand Concourse. In doing so, they created these 17 specially designated commercial infill sites, which were sites that contained existing non-conforming use structures that were built solely for commercial uses, at which commercial uses may be continued. So there's 17 of these sites in total. 12 are within Community District 5, and 11 of them have frontage along the Grand Concourse. So this is a map of the 11 affected sites. On the bottom there is the applicant site, 1775 Grand Concourse. So the 11 sites obviously are interspersed throughout the corridor between the Cross Bronx, which is the southern border here, and then it goes all the way up to where the C44 starts at East 183rd Street. So many of the sites here, so we're looking at probably 9 out of 11, already have some form of illuminated signage. So really the proposed text amendment would allow indirectly illuminated signs on these sites to keep operating legally. And it's important to note that this text amendment really isn't referring to a specific site or proposed sign. It's really about what we think would complement the re-tenanting of the commercial portions of the Grand Concourse within the special district. So the applicant themselves, right here and at the bottom of the map, it's Bronx Block 2822, Lot 7501, 1775 Grand Concourse, which is the southwest corner of Grand Concourse and East 175th Street. It's the old telephone company building and also the future site of the Bronx office, Department City. So this is the applicant site right here. At the top is the zoning lot, which is the northernmost portion of the block. The frontage looking west is photo 2, and then looking northwest is this. And you can see the ground floor commercial. There's a Con Edison, there's a tech company, an office of Bronx Lebanon Hospital, so it's got first floor. So really an indirectly illuminated sign is any illuminated non-flashing sign whose illumination is derived entirely from an external artificial source and is so arranged that no direct rays of light are projected from such artificial source onto residences or streets, so it's not disturbing what's around it. So on the left here, this is the frontage of 1775 Grand Concourse during the day, looking west, and the bottom is looking west at night. You can see there is a wall-mounted fixture, but it doesn't illuminate the signage at all. It's just to kind of illuminate the entrance. A little farther north on the Grand Concourse, about East 176th Street and Grand Concourse, this is taken from another one of the 11 designated commercial infill sites up here during the day and then at the bottom during the night. So this is a what's considered a directly illuminated sign. So backlit lettering, an awning, and then it looks like more completely directly illuminated signage. And so to the right here, we have 2 examples of indirectly illuminated signage. So obviously the wall-mounted fixtures are shining light onto the sign instead of the light coming directly from the sign itself. So the indirect illumination we think will improve the streetscape along the Grand Concourse, garner new foot traffic, possibly boost visibility for the local businesses, increasing safety for the pedestrians, all while maintaining the residential qualities of the Grand Concourse. So really what we're keeping in mind is that it's really not intended to induce or preclude development, and it will continue to disallow any direct illumination or flashing signage, and it won't increase the area of permitted signage. So the maximum surface area for signage is still 120 square feet. That's it.
Thank you, Hannah. Questions? Ms. Efron.
Is there a nice job, Hannah, welcome. Is there a business improvement district or an LDC associated with the Grand Concourse that perhaps has a storefront program in place?
No. What I meant was no.
Mr. Cirillo, then Mr. Dwight.
Just, while I certainly understand all of the reasons that on the slide for lighting and both the realistic and reality-based ones and the psychological ones for both retailers and pedestrians, how did the application grow to this degree? Because the applicant in the PowerPoint, there's 4 different entities listed. In the backup documentation, there's 1 applicant. So, and of course, this is sort of not only addressing the we'll call primary applicant's request,
Right.
but we're legalizing existing non-compliant lighting scenarios that run up Grand Concourse. So I'm just wondering how we got from 1 applicant to basically 11 sites, or is it even more than that, 17, but whatever, 11,
Right.
it seems like. How did this grow to be what it is?
Well, these 11 sites are really kind of special and unique in terms of the Grand Concourse, so it's kind of, they're treating commercial uses in a special way, so. Sean, what are your
We had requested, after looking at it, that we extend the site to include all of these commercial infill sites. I mean, these were designated at the time of the Grand Concourse Special District. They were recognized as commercial sites, and I think, just looking at their overall health, allowing a little more flexibility on these sites while maintaining it just seemed to make sense for us.
And that's fine, and I'm always a fan for legalization, or at least working with property owners to legalize. I'm just wondering, on those that are using existing indirect lighting now in an area that wouldn't otherwise permit it today, are there violations on these buildings? And if so, what occurs after this process? Are they eliminated? Is there still a liability for a business owner, but then could in the future operate, can deem themselves legal, but still deal with violations or liabilities in the past? What will happen if that even is the case for these businesses?
There aren't currently open violations for signage on these sites.
Okay.
We have been in touch with Department of Buildings, and we've made them aware. But again, we do think that they are appropriate, at least the indirectly illuminated.
That hasn't come up, but yet it's being fixed. So that's a good thing. Okay, thank you.
It's an anticipatory remedy. is
Yeah,
what we
no,
call
no,
it.
and as I said, when they're rational, it's a rational concept here on top of it, but it's interesting that they've gotten this far without anything coming of it, and yet are raising their hand to say, help us fix this now, so it's great.
We're all for rationality.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Ms. Levin.
Following up on that line of question, the existing zoning text is pretty starkly definitive. It says no flashing or illuminated signs will be allowed. I guess it's a variation of my question on the prior application. Was how'd that happen? Was that specifically planned for and now we're changing our mind? Or did we just sort of slip some signage language in from someplace else and not really think about it? And then, assuming that it really is a good plan for now, why not include the tiny handful of sites south of the expressway that are also covered by this, except for the fact that they are in another community district?
Right. We had asked that the limits of this be for Community District 5, and we'd been in touch. And Community District 5 had actually brought some of these sites to our attention, so that was kind of the reasoning for the extent. At the time of the text in the Grand Concourse Special District is very special in some ways.
Right.
I think at the time it was all about, preserving the character, residential qualities, but in doing so, realizing that you're preserving these commercial sites as well, which are really important to the community, and sometimes they've struggled. And I think realizing that maybe a little more flexibility would be helpful to them. They're important to the community. They're important to Community District 5. Safety along the concourse and lighting has always been an issue with them. So we think that this would help in that sense.
Okay, so maybe the first time around, we tilted a little bit too strongly in favor of residential limitations like no illuminated signs, and now we're moderating a little, realizing how it's
I
played
think it's
out.
a little bit of moderation. I think the intent, obviously, is still preserving the character of the residential quality there, but I don't think that this affects that. And again, just allowing a little more flexibility in keeping it to the indirectly illuminated signage.
Yeah,
We think we'll
that's
do
certainly
that.
better than the direct illumination.
Mr.
Thank you.
Dweck.
Just a question, on the slide showing the 3 types of signage, the grocery store, did I understand that that's going to be legalized, or that's still?
No,
that's
that's-
still not?
That's directly.
So that won't not,
Correct.
they'll have to change their sign if they want to be in compliance?
Yeah. From what I understand, a backlit awning like that is considered direct illumination.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions? It's got a lot of attention because this is where the Bronx office is going, so they want
We just want a nice sign.
very. This will be referred out to Community Board 5 for 60 days. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Sean.
Our next item is item number 6, page 55. Proposed zoning map amendment from R8 to C82 to bring existing uses into conformance. And our presenter is Dana Driscoll, project planner from the Bronx office. It's a Bronx pre-hearing application. We're on item number 6, page 55.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. 3276 Jerome Avenue, it's in the Bedford Park neighborhood of District 7. It's actually the northernmost parcel in the Concourse Special District. This is a mixed-use area east of the education complex that includes High School of Science, Clinton, and Lehman College. It's south of Marshallou Parkway and Van Cortlandt Park. And to its west, you have the number 4 IRT elevated line. The proposed use will, the proposed zoning change will legalize, to the upper right here, we're showing a queuing commercial area, which at this current point is an R8 district. This was intended to be a landscaped area, and it's been for a number of years used as a queuing area for the Dunkin' Donut and convenience store. And the proposal extends the C82 district east to legalize the commercial use at this location. The Community Board 7 and the Borough President recommended approval of this proposal, and this will be on for the hearing on Wednesday.
Any questions to Dana? Ms. Levin?
Dana, our briefing sheet says that in the bottom paragraph that all of this came to light when the applicant and current owner purchased the site in 2007 and filed modification plans in 2013. But later in our information says they're not planning any physical changes on the site. What was that modification that was planned in 2007?
At the
Or
change
2013?
I'm sorry, at the change of ownership, the new owners were basically looking to legalize the queuing area. They propose or plan no new development. But they were apprised that this was technically an R8 zone and the existing use was out of context.
So what was it they were trying to modify in 2013?
They wanted to extend some of the commercial uses on the site. This is a as of right commercial use in the CA2. There's an existing convenience store in addition to the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through that's located there.
Okay, so they've dropped the plans for the 2013 modification. They're
That's
just
correct.
trying to get their house in order. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions to Dana? Thank you, Dana.
Let's now move to item number 7, page 69, proposed zoning as originally certified. The project included zoning map and text amendment, special permit, and a CPC certification to facilitate a newly constructed nursing home and ambulatory diagnostic and treatment center in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's a Brooklyn pre-hearing item, and there are some changes associated with the project post-certification. And Connie is our presenter on this project and will apprise us of those. So we're on item number 7, page 69, Brooklyn pre-hearing.
Good afternoon. The applicant, Conover King Realty, is seeking the following actions to facilitate the development of a community facility building consisting of a nursing home and an ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility in the Red Hook neighborhood in the Borough of Brooklyn in Community District Number 6. Number 1, a zoning map amendment to rezone an approximately 38,000 square foot portion of a tax lot from an M21 to an M14/R6 or Special Mixed Use District 5, as the existing M21 district does not permit the proposed nursing home or the proposed ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility. Number 2, a CPC certification pursuant to Section 22-42 of the zoning resolution, which is required for any nursing home and health-related facilities located in residential districts. Number 3, a CPC special permit pursuant to Section 74-902 of the zoning resolution to allow the maximum permitted community facility FAR to apply to the proposed development. Without this special permit, the proposed development would be limited to the maximum residential FAR, which is 2.43 in an R6 district. And number 4, a zoning text amendment to Appendix F of the zoning resolution to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the rezoning area and to Section 123-63 to reflect the creation of the new mandatory inclusionary housing area. The zoning text amendment is requested in accordance with the city's mandatory inclusionary housing policy. Because the proposed development is a community facility, it will not trigger an affordable housing requirement. However, all residential developments, enlargements, and conversions within this mandatory inclusionary housing area that meet the criteria set forth in the mandatory inclusionary housing program would be required to comply with the requirements of either option 1 or option 2. The proposed development site is located at 141 Conover Street, which is block 555, lot 5, in the Red Hook neighborhood of Brooklyn. It is currently split by an existing zoning district boundary line with 38,000 square feet located in the M21 zoning district and the eastern 10 feet, which is comprised of 2,000 square feet within an R5 zoning district with a C13 commercial overlay. So this is the lot right here. The majority of it is located in the M21, which is to the west, and then there's a sliver of it along the eastern portion, which is in this R5 district, which has a C13 overlay along Van Brunt Street. The surrounding area is characterized by a mix of land uses, including single-family and multifamily residential buildings, industrial and manufacturing buildings, mixed-use buildings, transportation and utility facilities, public facilities and institutions, and vacant lots. So again, the R5 zoning district to the east has a C13 overlay mapped along Van Brunt Street, which is the main commercial corridor in the neighborhood. Red Hook West and Red Hook East, which are 2 of the New York City Housing Authority's developments, are located 2 blocks east in an R6 district. So this is a portion of Red Hook West. The proposed development is a 157,500 square foot community facility building that includes a 200-bed nursing home that will replace the applicant's current nursing home facility, which is located in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. It will also include an ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility for a total community facility FAR of 3.94. The proposed nursing home will be an 8-story L-shaped building that occupies the portion of the development site located mid-block on the south side of King Street between Conover and Van Brunt Streets, going through to Sullivan Street. The nursing home rises 7 stories, fronting on Sullivan and King Streets, before setting back and rising an additional story for a total building height of 89 feet, and the main entrance will be on King Street. So this is the nursing home portion here, with the main entrance located here. The nursing home has approximately 131,150 square feet for an FAR of 3.28. The proposed ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility has approximately 26,350 square feet for an FAR of 0.66. It rises 7 stories, located on the portion of the development site at the corner of King and Conover Streets, with the main entrance on Conover Streets. So that facility is located here.
What else? Anybody call me on this? I never give it out.
The proposed development includes 53 on-site accessory parking spaces and 16 bicycle parking spaces as well. A curb cut on Sullivan Street will provide entrance to and egress from the accessory parking. An egress-only curb cut will be provided on Conover Street for use by vehicles dropping off passengers, such as patients and visitors. So you can enter the parking here as well as exit, or you can drive through and exit on Conover Street here. The proposed development is located in a flood zone, and it will meet all applicable New York City Building Code and zoning resolution requirements pertaining to construction within a flood zone. Additionally, the applicant will implement an emergency preparedness plan consistent with the New York State Department of Health requirements. To facilitate this project, the applicant requests a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 38,000 square feet of lot area from an M21 to an M14/R6 district or special mixed-use district 5, a certification pursuant to Section 2242 of the zoning resolution, which is required for any nursing home or health-related facility in a residence district, a special permit to allow the maximum permitted community facility FAR pursuant to Section 24-11 of the zoning resolution to apply to the proposed development, and a zoning text amendment to apply to Appendix F to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the rezoning area, and to Section 123-63 of the zoning resolution to reflect the creation of the new mandatory inclusionary housing area. It should be noted that the citywide text amendment, Zoning for Quality and Affordability, contained several components that were designed to facilitate the development, renovation, or the expansion of long-term care facilities, which include nursing homes. Pursuant to the adoption of ZQA, or Zoning for Quality and Affordability, 2 of the 4 actions being requested, specifically the zoning certification and the special permit, no longer apply to the proposed development. As a result, the only actions that apply are the zoning map amendment and the zoning text amendment to apply a mandatory inclusionary housing area to the rezoning area. Following certification of this proposal on November 30th, 2015, Community Board 6 held a public hearing on this application on December 3rd and held a vote on December 9th, 2015. According to the minutes of the December 9th meeting, the Community Board recommended to conditionally approve the proposal, 29 votes in favor, 5 opposed, and 2 abstentions, subject to commitments that were made by the applicant in a letter submitted to the Community Board following the public hearing. However, the Community Board did not submit a resolution letter for the Commission's consideration. The Brooklyn Borough President held a public hearing on this application on December 22nd, 2015, and recommended disapproval of the proposal with the following modifications. Number 1, that the proposed M14 R6 MIH zoning be modified as follows. To have King and Conover Streets zoned to M12/R6A with MIH mapped. To have Sullivan Street zoned to R6B. Number 2, that the Sullivan Street parking garage entrance and exit be relocated to King Street. Number 3, that the applicant coordinate with the Department of Transportation to pursue the installation of direction signage to encourage cars, delivery trucks, and ambulances to turn off Van Brunt Street and King Street. And number 4, that the applicant shall provide to the City Council in writing commitments to the extent that it would be advancing resiliency and sustainability measures, to retain Brooklyn-based contractors and subcontractors, especially those who are designated LBEs, consistent with Section 6-108.1 of the city's administrative code, and MWBE and LBE establishments as a means to meet or exceed standards for Local Law 1, which is not less than 20% participation, as well as to coordinate the monitoring of such participation with an appropriate monitoring agency, to coordinate local hiring efforts with local service providers and community organizations, and to provide quarterly updates to Community Board 6 and local elected officials to demonstrate its monitoring and performance of such local hiring efforts. And finally, that for residential conversion of the existing nursing home, which again is located in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, it shall be required to contain no less than 25% of the residential floor area to be occupied in compliance with the zoning provisions of the Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Area Program, or the MIHA designated areas. Several comments and questions were posed by the Commission when this project was certified on November 30th, 2015, which I will address as well. One, a question that was posed regarding the programming for the ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility. Responses to that question have been provided in the materials that were submitted to the Commission. One comment was made regarding the scale of the proposed development in relation to the surrounding neighborhood. And so in addition to the streetscape drawings that are included in the land use application that show the heights of the buildings in the immediate blocks surrounding the proposed development, the applicant has provided additional renderings that show the scale of the development in the context of the broader neighborhood. One question was posed regarding the frequency or type of monitoring that's performed by the New York State Department of Health and other regulatory agencies in terms of the operations of the nursing home, particularly as being relevant since it's located in a flood zone. The federal government, which specifically the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, require that all nursing homes that participate in Medicare or Medicaid comply with minimum health and safety standards governing the operation of a nursing home. The New York State Department of Health is responsible for ensuring the health and safety of nursing home residents in the state of New York. All nursing homes in New York State are required to have emergency and disaster preparedness plans, which include emergency evacuation plans. These plans must be approved by the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, and updated annually. These plans include procedures for the proper care of patients and employees in the event of emergencies and disasters, including floods and the interruption of utility services. The New York State Department of Health is tasked with performing annual surveys every 10 to 15 months to ensure compliance with both federal and state regulations, which include requirements that emergency and disaster preparedness plans are in place and that emergency drills are performed throughout the year. If deficiencies in the emergency preparedness plan are uncovered during these annual surveys, a statement of deficiency and a plan of corrective action is issued. This would be made public and would affect a nursing home's rating by CMS. Every few years, CMS either joins the State Department of Health for its survey or surveys the nursing home facility subsequent to the Department of Health survey to confirm that the state is fulfilling its obligation to ensure compliance with regulations. And lastly, there was a question posed about why the Ambulatory Diagnostic Center wasn't located closer to Van Brunt Street. So the applicant would just like to clarify that the project doesn't have frontage on Van Brunt Street, and the Ambulatory Diagnostic and Treatment Facility portion of the proposed development, which is, again, located on the corner of King and Conover, is intended to be open to the public and was therefore designed to appear as a separate building from the nursing home with a distinct facade and a designated entrance on Conover Street.
Thank you, Connie. Questions? Ms. Deleuze.
Hi, Connie, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So just two primary questions. One has to do with the ambulatory care facility. Just, and I'm sure we'll hear more about this on Wednesday's hearing. Obviously this would be a critical, this would help fulfill and fill a critical need that exists in the neighborhood. So certainly information that really talks about the certainty of it happening and in what timetable I think would be very, very helpful. This is a very an underserved community as it relates to healthcare. And the other has to do with how it was determined that options 1 and 2 would be the preferred options for MIH. The median income in Red Hook houses east and west is about $15,200. So I'm just wondering if option 1 and 4 might be more appropriate, the 20% at 40%. In this particular case, I know that in this situation, the facility will be built, but, if sometime in the future that use changes, it may be that the AMI, if we track it now based on 40% of AMI, it might be more appropriate.
And 4, just to clarify, 4 would have to be paired with 1
Right,
or 2.
I'm saying 1 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's my suggestion. I don't know how much that was considered during the process, since maybe the conversations might have been focusing on other issues.
That's
So
right.
I don't know how much have folks weighed in on that.
So to address the first point about the programming for the Ambulatory Diagnostic and Treatment Facility,
Yeah.
I can't provide any more information that hasn't been provided in the materials now. Other than that, the intent is to provide a primary urgent care facility, and that the commitment has been made not to include a dialysis center. And per those materials, conversations have been had with various different potential providers, but we can have the applicant provide any updates since those materials were submitted, certainly. In terms of the MIH options, at the time, I believe that option 1 and option 2 were the main options out there, with the exception of the workforce proposal. So we wanted to offer, I think the belief was to offer some flexibility at the time. And since EQA was adopted, those modifications came out very recently. So this was adopted last week. So I don't think that option 4 was a part of that discussion. It didn't exist at the time. But I think that's, again, something that the applicant could address on Wednesday at the public hearing.
And obviously within the purview of the commission to address. Ms. Levin.
Hi, Connie, thanks for being here. As the one, I think I was the one who asked the scale question last time, and I still scratch my head about scale, but actually did walk around the block night before last, so I have a... There's one thing about looking at scale on a map, and it's another thing looking at scale in a neighborhood. And this really is a very varied scale neighborhood. But I return to basically a question about the land use rationale here for the R6, considering that the residential designations in the immediate area are for R5. And then I realized that we're being asked to add this to MX5, which already exists. And how do those MX5 regulations work? The current MX5 is for, what is it, an M14/R5. So that was clearly the scale intention, and it's located not too far away
That's right.
from this site. How do we align the land use rationales for those two different areas and two different scale designations? I mean, I appreciate that probably the economics of building a nursing home require the bigger density, greater density, but that's not a land use rationale, so how do we get there?
To speak again to kind of the proposed zoning districts that are here, the rationale is that, so you've got the zoning district line right here. To the west of it is the M21, and then to the east is the R5. And so what's been proposed, which is a MX district, which is the M14/R6, provides a transition both in terms of use and in terms of bulk. So in terms of use, it would allow a wider variety of uses than is currently permitted, and those uses are represented in the immediate vicinity of the proposed development. In terms of bulk, the M21 does allow for very tall buildings to exist. They may not be there now, but for the zoning.
Well, some of them are coming.
That could be true.
In other proposals, yeah.
So per the zoning, the existing zoning, the M21, buildings can go up to 60 feet, and at that point, the sky exposure plane kicks in and governs the building height. There is actually no maximum building height.
Right.
So depending on the size of your lot, you can go very tall. And juxtaposed against the R5, which is to the east, which is a lower density district, certainly, and is primarily characterized by, 2, 3, 4-story buildings with residential, on top of a commercial ground floor. And so the MX districts that's proposed actually provides some kind of a transition between these two districts. So for example, the MX envelope, so I can kind of address, because I know you made the point of there is another existing MX district here, but this MX district that's proposed will actually subject this proposed development to a different building envelope than, say, if it was just an R6, then they could build a residential building to a certain scale and density, versus if it was just a manufacturing business the same way, it would have to follow, the M zoning regulations. The MX has a certain contextual envelope, and so one of the components of that envelope is it does actually implement a maximum building height, which doesn't exist, and so that's actually 110 feet. And so that's kind of the rationale behind the proposed district. In terms of the MX5, so just a little bit of background, the MX5 that already exists in Red Hook was further south. If you follow, this is Van Brunt, if you follow it all the way down, you have the fairway that was down by the water, and the initial MX5 includes the fairway site, including some of the area around it, and it's my understanding that rezoning was intended to facilitate, that development in particular. And so that has a different zoning envelope because there's different proposed districts, but they're both mixed-use districts in Red Hook.
Okay. That's a very long and thoughtful answer, thank you.
Any other questions for Connie? Okay, thank you. Look forward to an interesting hearing on Wednesday.
So let's now advance to item number 8, page 139, proposed notice of intent to acquire office space for the Human Resources Administration at 375 Pearl Street. And our presenter is Bob Tuttle of the Manhattan office. We're on item number 8, page 139, Manhattan pre-hearing action.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is an application by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services in partnership with the Human Resources Administration to acquire approximately 150,000 square feet on the 21st through 24th floors and a portion of the 25th floor of an existing 32-story tower located at 375 Pearl Street within Manhattan Community District 1, also known as the Verizon Building, shown here. The requested action will facilitate the relocation of 3 HRA divisions. The Human Resources Administration currently occupies approximately 180,000 square feet of leased space at 250 Church Street in Manhattan's Tribeca neighborhood, denoted with the A here. The building houses HRA's General Support Services, which is responsible for the planning, outfitting, and ongoing support of all HRA properties citywide. Police Operations, which is responsible for security and crowd control at all HRA facilities. And the Investigation, Revenue, and Enforcement Administration, which is responsible for investigating client and vendor fraud, confirming clients' eligibility for benefits, and processing of ID NYC, the municipal ID card for New York City. The current lease at this property expires on July 31st, 2017. Negotiations for renewal of the lease have not been successful, as the landlord has other plans for the building. Consequently, DCAS and HRA are proposing to relocate before the expiration of this lease. The proposed office site is located within Manhattan's Two Bridges neighborhood. The surrounding area's built form is characterized by multifamily residential and mixed-use buildings. Adjacent to the site is Murray Bergstrom High School for Business Careers, shown here in the blue. To the south is the Brooklyn Bridge. To the north is One Police Plaza, shown in red, and as well as multifamily residential buildings, shown in the yellow. And then to the east is Tower in the Park multifamily residences, shown in orange. The site is within a C64 zoning district. The surrounding area is served by multiple bus routes, and access is available to subway lines 456 and JZ at the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station, with direct access at the municipal building. The proposed office space at 375 Pearl Street will accommodate approximately 800 staff members in modern office facilities. The space is currently vacant and will require moderate upgrades. The design of the space would follow the city's open office standard and would be fully handicap accessible. For GSS and PO, the location provides close proximity to their operations at 4 World Trade Center. For IREA, the location satisfies the need to be near the Manhattan courts and district attorney's office for daily meetings. Other tenants in the building will include the New York Police Department's Federal Monitor and Inspector General, per CPC approval in 2015, and the Department of Finance per CPC approval last month. In order to facilitate the proposed project, the applicant seeks approval of a notice of intent to acquire office space pursuant to Section 195 of the New York City Charter for use of the property located at 375 Pearl Street. The requested action will facilitate the relocation of the Human Resources Administration's General Support Services, Police Operations, and Investigation, Revenue, and Enforcement Administration divisions from their current location at 250 Church Street to the aforementioned property. At the public hearing on Wednesday, members of the applicant team will be here to answer any programmatic questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Bob. Questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Let's now advance to item number 9, page 153, proposed zoning text amendment to facilitate the infilling of existing arcades along Water Street in Lower Manhattan. Our presenter is Richard Suarez. It's a Manhattan free hearing action. Item number 9, page 153.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the Alliance for Downtown New York, which is the Lower Manhattan bid, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Department of City Planning for a zoning text amendment to the special Lower Manhattan district and related sections of the zoning resolution to facilitate the infill of existing arcades for retail use and the improvements of existing plazas by chairperson certification and CPC authorization, to allow events and tables and chairs within plazas and arcades as of right, and to continue to allow cafes within arcades by chairperson certification. This application was referred by Manhattan Community Board 2 Manhattan Community Board 1 and the Manhattan Borough President on January 19th for 60 days, is returning for public hearing on Wednesday. Recommendations for approval with conditions were submitted by both the Community Board and Borough President. The area that is subject to the text amendment is located in Community District 1 on the east side of Lower Manhattan, bounded by Fulton Street to the north, South Street to the east, Whitehall Street to the south, and Pearl Street and South William Streets to the west. In this area are 19 million square feet of Class A and Class B office space and over 100,000 employees. Within this area are over 110,000 square feet of arcades across 17 buildings and over 225,000 square feet of privately owned public spaces, i.e. plazas. The proposed zoning text attempts to address the poor pedestrian experience along the street and the lack of viable retail along the street. The arcades along the street that really dominate the streetscape are intended generally to provide additional pedestrian circulation space, but the Water Street arcades do not provide a useful pedestrian circulation purpose. These spaces are elevated and set back from the sidewalk, they dead end or they're obstructed, they're too narrow, the columns are too thick or too close together, and the adjacent open areas already provide a sufficient pedestrian circulation function. Building frontages along the street are often lined with blank walls or inactive building frontages such as lobbies, and the arcades along the street cause the ground floors to be set back from the sidewalk, failing to engage the pedestrian and hindering the vitality of any potential retail tenants. Most of the plazas along the street were provided at a time when no amenities were required, so these spaces lack many of the amenities that are required today of new bonus plazas, including seating of many types, planting, trees, lighting, drinking fountains, signage, bike racks, and retail frontage. And despite the excess amount of this public space, the lack of amenities do not make them usable. These spaces are highly irregular in shape and size and lack many of the eyes in the plaza or eyes in the street, generally making them very unsafe. The goals of the text, pretty generally, are to improve the street's pedestrian experience, and with that, the text intends to allow the infill of arcades to bring these ground floor uses closer to the street to engage the pedestrian. We want to provide useful amenities and services for nearby residents and employees, so the text would require service and retail establishments and limit the amount of lobby uses on the ground floor. The text intends to improve the quality of the public spaces by requiring upgrades to the plazas to meet the standards of current plaza rules. And the text intends to improve the flood resilience of buildings by requiring, or I should note that the building code requires all enlargement to be fully compliant with the floodproofing requirements of Appendix G. Just a quick example of how retail infill could look. This is an example of 200 Water Street. This is on Fulton Street here. Water Street's off to the side. And the infill would extend for the full depth and the full length and the full height of the arcade, but also bring with it an improved plaza right in front of it. Some examples of how the plaza improvements could look, some real-life examples of how poor public spaces, this here is the Grace Building right by the Bryant Park, was improved to the standards of public plazas to be more safe, more inviting, and more active. Another example, not too far away from there, is 1095 6th Avenue, a through-block elevated public plaza that was improved to be closer to the ground, the main entrance located on the plaza to be more active, more safe, more bright, more green, and more inviting. The text also allows events as of right within the plazas, allows public tables and chairs as of right within the plaza and the arcades, and continues to allow cafes by chairperson certification within the arcades. So just quickly, there were a number of questions that came up at the time of referral, which I will address before reviewing the community board and for resident recommendations. A commissioner asked about what the department learned from the events that were facilitated by the 2013 temporary zoning text. The goals of that temporary text were to help bring people back to the street following Hurricane Sandy, help change the negative perceptions of the street, and to also study the different ways that these empty, underutilized spaces could be reactivated. Around the time of referral of that text amendment in March 2013, EDC set out to find a coordinator for a summer and fall event series and selected a communication firm, the Berman Group, in mid-May, who had about 1.5 months to plan and host events. Overall, the series succeeded in bringing people to the street and creating a level of buzz that helped achieve a level of change in the street's negative perception. Events included fitness events, food sampling, games, small performances, informational booths, and food markets that kept nearby workers on the street during the work hours. The series was aided by a branding campaign led by DOT, using a consistent language of colors and logos on banners and epoxy, used at new and expanded DOT plazas and temporary sidewalk widenings and neckdowns. The biggest lesson we learned, though, was timing. Given the short amount of time that the Berman Group had to plan and coordinate events, many of these events were low-cost events that relied heavily on branding and promotional activities, which we generally did not want. But the Berman Group and EEC reported that building owners preferred events that featured giveaways from popular, nationally recognized consumer brands, as they tended to drive the most foot traffic. Despite the not so overwhelming success of that 2013 series, we felt that events, even as small as the ones that took place that summer, still proved to be a useful tool for activating these otherwise underutilized spaces. And we recommended to ourselves that a permanent text amendment should be pursued to allow events on an as-of-right basis. In 2014, EDC sought and received a mayoral zoning override to effectively extend the applicability of that 2013 text through the end of 2015. With financial support from EDC, Downtown Alliance planned and hosted a series of events in the summers of 2014 and 2015 called Game On. These events were much more robust than the 2013 series, and included events such as outdoor movies, shuffleboard, outdoor living rooms, fitness events, food trucks, green markets, beer gardens, and World Cup viewing events. The Downtown Alliance reports that the Game On series was much more successful than what was observed during the 2013 series, with most feedback being positive and requesting even more food and more events, and more games. The success of the 2014 and 2015 summer events, which were led by partners on this application, further attests to the usefulness of the events as one tool to activate these otherwise underutilized spaces. Related to events, a commissioner asked if there would be an overall coordinator for all of the events, and if the community board will be involved in the scheduling of the events. As I've noted at the time of referral, the Downtown Alliance coordinated events across the plazas in 2014 and 2015 and engaged the community board along the way, but I will let the Downtown Alliance speak to that on Wednesday when they're here for the public hearing. Another question came up about the lead time required to install temporary flood barriers. Appendix G establishes 12 hours as the absolute minimum amount of time before a storm required to evacuate a building and to install temporary flood shields and necessary egress ramps and stairs. It is instructive, however, to point to DOT's rules for flood barriers that are located in the public right-of-way, for which a revocable consent may be issued, which allows the shields to be installed no more than 72 hours before a storm and requires them to be removed within 48 hours of the water receding from the street or a change in the forecast. Often these systems are full building systems, which are typical of what we would expect on Water Street. Overall, there's lots of flexibility afforded by DOB, but DOB does require a design professional to inspect the transport, installation, and deactivation of a temporary system. The time required to assemble and deactivate a system depends on the size of the building being protected and where these materials are being stored. Two commissioners asked about the public benefits of the compensating amenity required by the proposed text and whether such amenity is commensurate with the benefit to the building owner when the arcade is infilled for retail use. Now, while the proposed zoning text explicitly refers to plaza upgrades as the compensating amenity, we strongly believe that retail infill in itself is a public benefit. We think that this is the appropriate way to evaluate the public benefits of the plaza upgrades and new retail spaces is to compare what we're gaining to what we're losing. The benefits, as we see it, are redesigned, greener public spaces with more useful amenities that meet the zoning resolution standards for public plazas. These are standards informed by Holly White that led to the development of the urban plaza rules in 1975 and later the public plaza rules in 2007. Another benefit is safer, brighter public spaces and streets. This idea of eyes on the street, eyes on the plaza, bringing the activity closer to the street, closer to the plaza, really brightening up these sidewalks and these spaces. Another benefit is restaurants, shops, and other local amenities for area residents and employees. The text and the infill would create a more human-scale street that reduces the monumentality of these buildings. The street was designed for cars to be an efficient mover of vehicles and did not really think about how the pedestrian experience would take place. So the infill would bring some visual variety to the ground floor and really reduce the widening effect of the street. And the text will establish clear requirements for design and use of retail spaces and the improvement and maintenance of public spaces, for which today there are none. As for the loss, as I mentioned before, we, the public, are losing these arcades that do not serve a pedestrian circulation function, which was always the original intent of these spaces, such that there is limited to no value to their existing configuration. Again, they're elevated and set back, they dead end or they're obstructed, they're too narrow, the columns are too thick or too close together, or there's already enough circulation space provided on adjacent sidewalks or open areas. Yes, these spaces provide shelter from the rain and the snow. We cannot deny that there will be a financial benefit to building owners in the form of increased ground rents. But without some financial incentive for the building owner, we will never see the improvements that the text intends to facilitate. Overall, when comparing what we're gaining to what we're losing, we believe that the public benefit of the plaza upgrades to the retail infill, along with the clear standards that are put into place, greatly exceed the public benefit or lack thereof of the arcades as they currently exist. On March 22nd, Community Board 1 held a public hearing on the proposed zoning text amendment, and by a vote of 19 in favor, 11 opposed, and 7 abstaining, recommended approval of the zoning text amendment with conditions. Now, we intend to have a post-hearing follow-up on April 11th, so I will go through the conditions, and then we'd like to have testimony on Wednesday, and then again follow up at the next review session. The first condition, the first request, was that a referral mechanism is incorporated into the zoning text to require a 60-day period of community board review and comment for any certification or authorization. The second is because building owners and landlords are potentially realizing substantial value as a result of the repurposing of these public amenities, no matter how underutilized, The community's needs for various types of facilities located within the future infill arcades must be considered encouraging, including but not limited to schools, pre-K, libraries, senior centers, ice skating rinks, and other recreational spaces. The next two are linked. Certifications or authorizations by the City Planning Commission or the CPC Chairman should strongly consider the community's view that small, independent retail establishments are preferred over chain stores in any such infill space, and due consideration for affordability should also be taken into account to avoid vacancies. The fifth is during community board review for each of the applications for infill, the applicant must be made responsible for explaining the specific community offset and benefit that will be provided in exchange for the arcade infill. The sixth, when an arcade infill triggers a plaza upgrade, plazas must also be built to a resiliency standard that could withstand future extreme weather events. The seventh, owners of properties similar to 200 Water Street, where the benefit to the property owner clearly outweighs the community benefit from plaza upgrades, should be required to provide benefits in addition to the plaza upgrade, such as enhancements to the surrounding sidewalks and the nearby Pearl Street playground. CB1 requests that the arcade infill at 200 Water Street not be used just to expand the existing large box retail and prefers retail that positively activates Fulton Street. I should note for this that we will have a representative from 200 Water Street that will be speaking at Wednesday's hearing. Number 8, in cases of infill where there are no plazas on the zoning lot and the provision of an indoor public space or off-site public space could satisfy the requirements of a compensating amenity, that CB1 requests that property owners also improve their sidewalks and not use public funds to do so. The Downtown Alliance, EDC, and City Planning shall return to Community Board 1 after the first 3 projects or the first year after the zoning amendment, whichever comes first, to report on the progress and assess the success of the program with the potential for making appropriate changes as necessary based on experience with the program to date. And now there are more conditions coming in. CB1 requests that particular attention is paid to the issue of lighting on Water Street. Improved lighting along Water Street will enhance safety and encourage more people to visit the area. CB1 requests that the Downtown Alliance, EDC, and City Planning work together with property owners and the New York City Department of Education and the New York City School Construction Authority to create suitable locations for schools and pre-kindergarten centers within the infill spaces. And the last one, Community Board 1 requests that City Planning include in the zoning text language requiring, or at least encouraging, the use of environmentally friendly construction methods in connection with all arcade infill development projects. On March 25th, the Manhattan Borough President submitted a recommendation for approval of the proposed zoning text amendment with conditions. She recognized that the arcades and plazas do not serve as circulation space or as public gathering spaces, and writes that a holistic plan for bringing these spaces up to standards today makes sense. She asked that we add language in the general purposes of the Special Lower Manhattan District that a goal is to enliven the pedestrian experience along the street. She believes that the 60-day community board referral request is reasonable and requests that preference during review should go to plants and materials that can withstand large amounts of water. She feels that the uses that are permitted are too broad and that the use requirements set forth in section 91E31 of the proposed zoning text should be modified to exclude use groups 5, 7, 9, and 10 so that the uses that are permitted align with the goal that they serve residents and workers in the area. She asked that the text should, for the longest frontages, require a minimum number of establishments and/or lobby uses to meet the goals of retail variety and vibrancy. And overall, she recognizes the need for flexibility, but requests that the text be modified to really focus on local retail needs. We expect to have speakers from the community board, from the borough president, from the borough president's office, from the Downtown Alliance, from the Economic Development Corporation, again from Rockrose, representatives from 200 Water Street, and perhaps a few more building owners and some other speakers in opposition.
Thank you, Richard. Questions? Mr. Cantor.
Thank you, Richard. Did I understand you to say that the incrementing of protection against flood was considered an amenity?
A goal is to protect these buildings, and the SIR report did set out an initiative to set forth a permanent program to upgrade the public spaces and the buildings and to improve the flood resiliency of these buildings. So this proposed text amendment would fulfill that initiative.
But does that make it a quid pro quo for getting out of some other responsibility?
There are no standards today for these buildings to be flood-proofed. There are 0 standards, and this would require them to be.
I understand that, but again, as I heard you, it suggested that improvement against flood is an amenity, and implicit in that, in my head, came, so here's the trade-off, and I don't understand why there should be a discussion of a trade-off.
I don't think that anyone was, I mean, we do see the protection of these buildings as an important amenity for the city. We do want these buildings to stay online.
Not an amenity.
Well, I think it's a benefit for these
Yes.
buildings to continue to stay online, to be able to get back online.
Tremendous benefit to those whose basements were flooded in the Water Street area.
Right, yes.
The landlords as well as their tenants.
And to get these employees back into their offices, to get these residents back into their homes. Yes, I think that's an important thing. It's important to protect Lower Manhattan. Yes, and I think this is one step towards protecting these large buildings.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Efron?
Richard, thank you. You synthesized a lot of information in a very coherent way, and I truly appreciate it. Did the question of restrooms and changing stations for babies or free Wi-Fi come up at all in the context of this? I know it's primarily for residents and business residents, but it seems to me that it will also attract those using the ferry to Governor's Island and shopping at the seaport. And I'm just wondering, considering the great length of this, whether that's
Right.
anticipated.
I think EDC and the Downtown Alliance can speak to other improvements along Water Street, but I believe that this is a Wi-Fi district, so there is free public Wi-Fi along the street. In terms of restrooms, as far as I understand it, restrooms are required, in terms of events, restrooms are required when liquor is served. So the state liquor authority does require that there be access to restrooms, probably porta potties during these events. There is no requirement for restrooms in terms of the plaza upgrades. The type of user that goes into these new infilled spaces, depending on their type of use, I'm sure a restaurant and a pizza place requires a restroom.
Is there an aggregate amount of square footage that you have calculated will likely be the infill?
Yes, I think, I don't have the number in front of me. There are about 100,
Was it in here? I apologize.
there are 110,000 square feet of arcades. A slightly lower amount would be by certification. So if you have 110,000 square feet, if you just take away, say, this is the authorization area, an authorization area, an authorization area, and then there are certain areas that no infill will be allowed, you come down to maybe closer to 103,000 square feet by certification. And then there would be also, we expect that ground floors would be kind of rejiggered and reconfigured to maybe reduce the size of your lobby to have a deeper retail space. These arcades are between 10 and 30 feet deep. So we would imagine that the shallowest retail spaces will probably either expand existing retail spaces or eat up into lobby spaces. So you could see up to maybe 150, 160,000 square feet of new retail space facilitated if this entire project were implemented.
I understand it might be hard to do under the zoning text, but it seems that public restrooms for an additional 100,000 square feet should somehow be included in that. And I don't know if it's voluntary by building owners, but it just seems like a real public amenity if we're talking about
For public use.
public use. Yeah.
Ms. Deluz?
Richard, just going back to the community board's recommendations and their list specifically about whether the consideration for schools and pre-K seats and things like that. Just so, can you just walk us through whether or not any of these sites would be appropriate? A school seems unlikely, if not impossible, but perhaps a pre-K. Could you just walk through whether or not any of these might be appropriate for some of the uses that they've indicated, just based on the configuration?
Sure. So I will note that these uses are not disallowed, they are allowed under the text. The average infill that would be facilitated by certification is under 6,000 square feet, closer to 5,500 square feet. I mean, it depends on the configuration of the ground floors and how they're rejiggered. I'm no expert into the programming of pre-K and other community facilities. I think the largest buildings and the largest ground floors that may be able to accommodate some of these spaces are One New York Plaza, 55 Water Street, perhaps 32 Old Slip here, and then maybe these two buildings, 7 Hanover Square and 77 Water Street. These are spaces that have larger ground floors, larger arcades that could be filled in with a little bit more depth. But I think generally we're not entirely sure how likely these spaces could go in. But I think there are opportunities for these to take place. I think we have to dig a little deeper and kind of revisit these ground floor plans and their depths. We will have some owners and the Downtown Alliance and EDC to perhaps speak a little bit more to that if they're here today, so they can do some homework on these.
If I could follow up, I guess the challenge is, I mean, this is a real need, obviously. And from an owner's perspective, I would assume that they're gonna be able to get higher rents from other uses than from these uses. So if we really do want to incentivize those uses, then we need to give more thought to how we want to, tip the balance towards uses that the community needs and the public needs, and that would still accomplish all the goals that you're talking about.
Right, yeah. I mean, they're useful amenities, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be here.
Right, well, some of them are more than amenities, they're necessities.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the overarching goal here, I think, is the revitalization of Water Street as essentially a back office district, and the balancing of the east side of Broadway with, given the tremendous investment and revitalization in the west side of Broadway. So the community board is certainly looking at it probably primarily from a residential perspective, but I'm sure one of the reasons EDC is involved, and certainly the Downtown Alliance, is thinking about it in terms of a commercial perspective. And so both these have to be balanced. I think it's probably, I would assume, unlikely that a school could go here, but a pre-K is something that benefits not only residential community, but could benefit an office worker community as well, as does daycare all the time. So I think that's likely to happen. These owners, for the most part, if their buildings become economically unviable, would convert them to residential use probably, which is not necessarily the best use for this street. Any other questions for Richard? This will also be an interesting hearing on Wednesday, I think. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
So let's now go to item number 10, page 240, proposed department-initiated zoning text amendment affecting the contribution rates from the transfer of development rights from listed theaters and the special Midtown District Special Theater Subdistrict. We're on item number 10, page 240, proposed theater subdistrict fund text amendment. Now, presenter is Stephen Johnson of Manhattan office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The department is proposing a zoning text amendment to the zoning resolution to modify the contribution rate into the theater sub-district fund, which is created from the transfer of development rights, or TDRs, from listed theaters in the sub-district to a receiving site within the sub-district. This text amendment will establish a new, more rational methodology for calculating the contribution rate that is based on the actual value of the TDRs. And it will also be more aligned with the original intent of the 1998 text amendment that created the mechanism. Now, the city recognizes the importance of Broadway as an economic generator and also for the development of the theatrical arts and culture throughout the world. Over the years, the city has taken numerous steps in order to support and strengthen the long-term viability of the theater. In this presentation, I'll give a broad overview of the sub-district and then take you through the proposal. So the theater sub-district is located within the special Midtown District and centrally located in Community District 5, between 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue, which is right here, 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue. From West 40th Street to West 57th Street. It also includes a small 3-block frontage, 150 feet west of 8th Avenue between 42nd and 45th Street. That's right here. This overlaps with the special Clinton District. And as you can see from the land use map, the predominant use here is in red. It's commercial. It's a lot of commercial. You can see more residential uses as you move west into the Clinton area. You have, obviously, Central Park here. This is the Port Authority bus terminal, and Bryant Park. We have the bow tie in Times Square right here, which is in the Midtown District, and that Midtown District moves eastward through Rockefeller over to 3rd Avenue. Now, our zoning map shows the extent of the high bulk commercial districts in the area. They're dominated by the C6, which are widely mapped within the special districts. A few of these are unique to the special Midtown District and have a distinctive floor area ratio and bonus rules. Most have a base FAR of 10 to 15, which could then be increased with a public plaza. Now, this map here depicts the entirety of the theater subdistrict, here with the 8th Avenue corridor in blue, and then the subdistrict core right here in gray. Now, the original special theater district was created in 1967 as the first special district established pursuant to the New York City zoning resolution. It was created to preserve and protect the unique character of the area as a cultural, theatrical, and entertainment mecca, and to protect theaters from the westward creep of Midtown office development. It also encouraged the creation of new theaters by allowing a floor area bonus for development, which included a theater, and 5 theaters were created with that bonus mechanism, such as the Marriott Marquis, the Gershwin, and the Circle in the Square. In 1982, the Board of Estimate approved the special Midtown District, which created the theater's sub-district within the new Midtown District. And the purpose of the Midtown District was to establish a framework for development and preservation within this area, within the central business district. And at the same time, new zoning provisions were introduced to further enhance the theater sub-district through the transfer of development rights to nearby lots and to restrict the demolition of 44 theaters listed in the zoning resolution. These new provisions included more flexibility in floor area transfers and a floor area bonus for the rehabilitation of a theater, which was used for the New York City Center Theater and for the Biltmore. So here we have our listed theaters, all built before 1929, and all but 12 theaters are designated landmarks and/or interior landmarks. The bulk of the non-landmark theaters are related to the 42nd Street Development Project. So the theaters like the Harris, the Liberty, the Lyric, the Empire were rehabbed in 1984, but they're not landmarked buildings, except for the New Amsterdam, which is this one right here. So the 1998 Theater Sub-District Text Amendment established a new mechanism for listed theaters to transfer their available development rights throughout the sub-district in exchange for retaining, preserving, and maintaining a legitimate theater use, and for a contribution to a newly created theater sub-district fund. This provided more opportunities for theaters to transfer their development rights while strengthening requirements for legitimate theater use. So the current zoning regulations pursuant to section 81744, where a listed theater can transfer development rights to a receiving site within the sub-district. These apply for the City Planning Commission certification 744A and for a City Planning Commission authorization of 744B. Now, the authorization is for receiving sites that are located along the 8th Avenue corridor, which I showed you earlier, which was in blue on that map. So, the current regs, the maximum amount of floor area transferred from a granting site is the basic maximum floor area permitted, less the floor area of the existing building, which would be the theater, and any previously transferred development rights. Each transfer irrevocably reduces the allowable floor area of the granting site by the amount transferred. The maximum floor area that can be transferred to a receiving site is no more than 20% of the base FAR of the receiving site. Assurances for the continuance of legitimate theater use are made, and of course, legal documents are executed ensuring that the appropriate funds are deposited into the theater sub-district fund. Now, these conditions and limitations are all very administrative and mainly confirming numbers, but it's the last one here that we're mainly here to talk about, which is related to the fund. So the goal of the fund is to promote and develop the production of new theatrical work, cultivate new audiences, showcase Broadway and its role in the history of American theater. Very liberal type of goals for the fund. The current methodology for determining the contribution rate to the fund is based on a dollar value multiplied by the total amount of transferred square feet. So if you transfer 10,000 square feet of TDRs and the rate is $10 per square foot, then the contribution to the fund is $100,000. Now, the original rate, $10 per square foot, was based on a 20% of the average sales of property in the theater subdistrict in 1998. Now, the contribution rate is required to be adjusted every 3 to 5 years, and the department does this by using Department of Finance data and taking all of the assessed property values within the subdistrict and dividing by the total built square footage in the subdistrict. Since the original rate of $10, in 1998, the rate has been adjusted twice, as you can see the numbers up there, in 2006 and 2011. And at the end of this year, 2016, it will have been 5 years since the last adjustment. Now, since 1998, there have been 23 transfers from 9 granting theaters to 15 receiving sites that transferred approximately 600,000 square feet, which resulted in approximately $8.6 million in contributions to the fund. Now, to give you some brief information on the fund, the Subdistrict Fund is administered by the Nonprofit Theater Subdistrict Council. The council consists of the mayor, the Speaker of the Council, the Manhattan Borough President, and the Director of City Planning, as well as 4 representatives appointed by the mayor and the City Council Speaker from the performing arts, theatrical, and related industries. Since 1998, there have been 4 rounds of grant making, totaling approximately 37 grants for $5.7 million, going to about 24 different groups, such as the Pregones Touring Puerto Rican Theater, Rosie's Theater Kids, New Dramatists, the Lark Play Development Center, and a variety of theater companies. And it was just announced on March 16th that a new round of funding for $2 million is available from the Theater Subdistrict Council. And these grants are focusing on access to professional positions and developing more diversity within the field. So our proposal, it's fairly straightforward. What we found is that we were undertaking the prescribed 3 to 5 year contribution rate review and adjustment last year. As you know, when I was up here talking about Ellen Hayes and Neil Simon, we were using the existing methodology. So what we did is we reviewed all of the completed transfers pursuant to 81744 and found that the contribution amount to the fund expressed as a percentage of the actual amount paid for the transfer development rights ranged from about 4% to 9%. As I mentioned earlier, the 1998 Theater Subdistrict City Planning Commission report clearly states that the $10 per square foot rate is based on 20% of the average sales of property in the theater subdistrict. Thus, the 4 to 9% contribution rate is far less than the 20% envisioned by the commission in 1998. So the department is proposing that the contribution rate be set at 20% of the price paid for the TDRs. This would be a more rational methodology for determining the contribution rate to the fund instead of using the Department of Finance's assessed property values, which are not based on actual market price or sales price. This way, the contribution amount would be based on the actual value of the TDRs. Additionally, because there are few arm's length transactions in this area, and there are many variables that can influence the price paid for the TDRs that may or may not be directly related to their fair market value, the department is also proposing to establish a base price or floor amount for TDRs within the subdistrict. So this base price per square foot would be adjusted every 3 to 5 years and will be established via a market study undertaken by a certified valuation and appraisal company. So the proposed text, zoning text, is written so that the contribution amount that goes into the fund would be from the granting site would be the greater of the 2 numbers, either the market study valuation price or the 20% of the TDR price. And finally, the existing zoning of the transfer pursuant to certification, this is 81744A, allows the transfer of development rights by commission certification provided that the provisions I mentioned on slide 6 are met. So like there's available square footage to transfer, they have been reduced previously if they transferred any, et cetera. So discretion here is very limited. And these conditions are all ministerial, confirming numbers, making sure legal documents are appropriate, and that the funds are deposited. So the department is proposing that to streamline the process and making this action a chairperson certification. This will increase efficiency, allow the TDRs to reflect a more accurate and timely price, and will be similar to other chair certifications for transfers like in the Hudson Yards, for example. The commission will review adjustments to the base and the floor price every 3 to 5 years when it's adjusted up or down. And then as it currently is in the text, any applications pursuant to either 744A or 744B will be referred out to the community board, council member, and the borough president.
Questions? Mr. Dweck?
Do you have an idea of how many square feet are left to be able to transfer?
There's approximately 1.5 million square feet left.
So, and that would, in your approximation, generate, based on, what is the TDR value? Do you have an approximate?
The base price that we're establishing now, we should be getting a report back from the appraiser in about 2 weeks. So I'll have that when I take this out to Community Board 5.
Ballpark figure?
No.
No, you don't ballpark.
No ballpark figure. But I also want to add, though, that even though there's 1.5 million square feet available, that's the maximum amount available. Doesn't mean it's actually going to be transferred or it's going to have a place to land.
It's likely to be more than $17 a foot.
Got it. The 20% would be.
The 20%, yes, indeed. Mr. Cantor?
I should certainly hope so. The way you presented it, there were two options. The final text will clearly show that the two options are available, stay together.
The two options for either the 20% of the actual price paid for the TDRs or the number that we're getting through the market study.
Okay,
The higher of the
because
two.
As you noted, the sales price is subject to all sorts of side arrangements with
Exactly.
very frequently.
That's why we have proposed a floor price. We think in many cases, we should be easily able to tease out the actual price, especially since at least one of the major theater owners is a not-for-profit itself, but in case we can't, and increasingly these kinds of transactions from the purchasing side, because of the way developments financed are relatively transparent, but because of that concern, obviously, we want to establish a floor price through an appraisal system. Ms. Efron, then Ms. Levin.
This makes a lot of sense, and I was just going to say that I've seen published, quoted in the New York Times, cost of or value of air rights. And since the district goes up to the north side of 57th Street, which is a neighborhood that's had quite a few transferred air rights, I just want to make sure that the market study valuation is for air rights, not just for theater air rights in terms of value.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're getting numbers from the company, and then we're looking at what those numbers are, and we're going to have a discussion with them about what those are valued at. But typically, as what we do in Hudson Yards, there is a percentage taken of the TDRs. That's because there's so few buyers for these. It's not like an open market, and there's 20 people who want the TDRs. So there's some percentage that gets assigned to each development right for an area, and that's part of what they're trying to distinguish with the market study.
I'm sorry, but the air rights values will be determined by an appraisal based on the geographic area.
Yeah, that's right.
Not just on the theater district. Okay, great.
Ms. Levin and Mr. Marin.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I got to know this text fairly well about 10 years ago when, this all got created at a time when the Broadway theaters were really under some duress and people weren't going to Broadway anymore, and the theater owners were upset about having landmark properties that they couldn't afford to take care of because not enough people were coming to Broadway. And there's no development going on. It was obviously a very different world. But as it turns out, there's only one theater in Community District 4, and at the time I was chairing the Land Use Committee, that was the very first one that ever did that did one of these transfers. And everyone realized that no one had bothered to set up the sub-district council or the fund, and the mechanics that underlay what had been put in the zoning hadn't been followed through on. So it was only, then that all of this stuff actually got put in place, and we had to spend a lot of time understanding how it really worked. It seemed to me at the time that, and even then, in what was that, 2003, 2000, something like that, a long time later. No, that's when these rules were put on the books, but the first time it was used was much more recently, when even then the situation in the district had changed. And there are a number of other provisions in this text that seem a little bit ripe for tune-up, and I guess, so my big question is, this is absolutely a good piece of text to fix. Did you do a comprehensive look at the theater sub-district in general, and are there other seems to me there are a few other things in here that could use some tightening up, in particular the requirement for a 20% reserve to carry out a reporting commitment that never seemed to me that burdensome. There's a provision in here where the Theater Sub-District Council is supposed to be giving an annual report to a bunch of bodies, including this commission. I don't think we've ever seen that annual report.
Well,
seems like there's some room for cleanup. And then just to follow it up with a bigger one, I noticed the announcement of the new granting opportunities for basically job training, which is a good thing, but not really, if you read the text about what the sub-district council is supposed to be doing, job training's not in that list. It's about developing audiences. So is there more that we ought to be tuning up here?
Okay. Well, in reference to the new round of funding and what its focus and goal is, I can tell you I wasn't involved with how they made those goals for this new round of funding. But I know that it's always been very broad. It's been applied very broadly with what the funding can go to, and I don't know if that includes what, I'm assuming it includes what they have in now. But in reference to your other comments, we did not look deeply into other areas of the text because we were tasked with pinpointing this and getting it done by today's date. And we did that. And
so good on that.
Largely at Commissioner Levin's urging, as I may recall.
All good, all good.
But I can tell you that we are aware of some other aspects of the regulations in there, and we actually have had some discussions with the industry about some of those. And I would love to hear any ideas you have. I mean, you mentioned 2 things, but if you have...
Yeah, and those are sort of ministerial details, but...
Sure. But any other things, we're definitely open to, and we're actually starting to look into that now.
Yeah, I suspect you may hear back. During the referral periods, I suspect you'll be hearing back from the community boards and probably the borough president on these fronts too. And I think, even though we want to pinpoint it on this market price, because the market's moving fast and we want to capture that value before it gets away from us, but I suspect, this is a delicate balance between the theater owners and the communities and the not-for-profit theater world, and they're all very able to speak up for themselves at great length. And
so our city planning website has a page dedicated to the Theater Sub-District Council, and it's periodically updated with new information and charts and what the money goes to and meeting minutes. And I guess we could have a discussion what a report is, but there are statements on the site that may have
it's a little lean,
documentation.
and it doesn't look like it's been updated in a year, so.
It's being updated today.
Yeah,
It's
good.
It's much better now.
Oh.
It's already updated.
Okay, good on that.
We've just we should have said something about this, I think, to all of you, if you haven't looked recently, but we have recently tremendously updated our website. So you should all take a look at it. But to Stephen's point, we are looking at the broader theater transfer bonus area. Because as you know, the theater industry has changed over the past 20-some-odd years. We also know it's a highly cyclical industry and doing extremely well right now in no small measure because tourism is doing so well in the city. But we do want to assure that, A, the industry continues to thrive, B, that these theaters can be, which are, for the most part, landmarked and listed theaters, are able, given their structure, to serve today's audiences and today's performers as well, and use the resources that are generated here to serve the not-for-profit and, well, the theater community more broadly. So all of those are well under discussion, but we wanted to advance this particular text for all the reasons that you said.
Good, I'm glad you're doing it.
Mr. Moran, then Mr. Cirillo.
Stephen, thank you. Two questions. One is basically sort of a follow-up, I think, on Commissioner Dweck's question of available air rights, which is, you quoted as 1.5 million, but then you also said if there are uses for them, basically. I may be paraphrasing. So do we know if there are, and knowing that this area keeps growing and growing, do we know that any empty, I guess, surface parking lots that are planning to be developed? Do we know of any 1- or 2-story taxpayers that may be planning to develop where these uses, these air rights could be transferred to, of course, purchased? And then Chairman Weisbrot just mentioned something that I was also thinking about, was the expansion of maybe the area of which these rights may be transferred to, because if we're going to have development rights that in an appraisal, when we're doing an appraisal now, and land is available, that's one number. If there's no land available, then that's going to become another number. And so I'm just thinking of, ways of helping to enhance the amount by looking at developable sites and maybe expanding the boundary where we can capture some development opportunities.
We looked at some soft sites in the area, and there are a number of them. But with any soft site, you don't know exactly why someone's not, putting their property up for sale. There are maybe 6 or 7 parking garages. They're not lots, but they're open, like 4-story garages, which are ripe for development. But there are, generally speaking, I think there are, more so than in others, maybe certain limitations into landing these sites in here. And I think if we open up the discussion of broadening the theater sub-district, that would be very difficult.
We'll never get this done.
Yeah, because I think back in '98, that one of the discussions was expanding it across the 8th Avenue corridor, and that was cut off because it's a residential district. So we've already had these discussions.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of ways to try to augment this study that we're doing to get the highest value that we possibly can. That's all.
Mr. Cirillo, then Ms. Efron.
Yes, just a question about it's really a timing issue regarding, obviously this is being referred out, so I don't know if there's been any sort of legwork that has begun on the market study valuation portion of this, so that upon adoption, if everything were to stay the same, when is the trigger for moving to the new methodology, or is there this lag of time because then the valuations have to begin and the study has to be determined? So how does that?
There's no lag.
Okay.
I think, as Stephen mentioned, we anticipate the market study being done in a few weeks, so it will be available for the community board, and
We'll have some preliminary numbers to take and say, this is what we're looking at.
And ultimately for us. Ms. Efron.
At a certain point, if the fund contribution is too onerous, now it's tax deductible or a business expense, so it is only half the cost, so to speak, to most developers. But at a certain point, if it becomes too onerous, it diminishes the value to the nonprofit theaters, for instance, in having the purchase paid for, or it reduces the amount they receive. So it seems to me it's really important to look at how effective the fund has been with its grants. And I don't know if that falls under Commissioner Levin's question about whether there should be a reporting, but it shouldn't be just a penalty for buying air rights. There actually should be some corresponding utility in how the funds are being used.
Well, we can certainly provide you with a presentation of how they have been used, and as Stephen indicated, a new round is currently underway and what is anticipated. And I will say that in terms of the onerous nature of it, as you noted, the value of the air rights are the value of the air rights, and in effect, the share that the public gets will be from the theater owners, not from the purchasers, because the purchasers will pay what the purchasers will pay. But this is, obviously something that, from the theater owner's perspective, this has been a very good thing, because for the most part, absent the ability to float their air rights in this area, their air rights would be landlocked, and they would have zero value. So I remember my old days in the theater district when the theater owners were trying to figure out how to float their air rights. It was more or less the same as Russia looking for a warm water port. It was something that they just, constantly looking for some way to get value and should have value, given the fact that their theaters are not only landmarked, but the volume of space within them have to be maintained. So, all in all, this was a very good construct, and we want to make sure it continues to work.
Great.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks,
So this
Steve.
is referred out for
Yes.
60 days.
And congratulations in getting it.
So Commissioners, this Wednesday, March 30th, just want to note that 704 Ocean Terrace has been laid over, and you have a favorable resolution with respect to the Woodlawn rezoning, which involves establishment of an R4A district on portions of property in Woodlawn, the Bronx. As for April the 13th, staff will be preparing favorable resolutions based on Community Board or President, public hearing for Socrates Sculpture Park. We have 375 Pearl Street office space, which was presented earlier by Bob Tubble, the HRA office space project. And due to the historic your historic adoption of zoning for quality affordability and the City Council's adoption of that text, 170 Buffalo Avenue, which is a special use permit to facilitate a nursing home, will no longer be needed, and we expect the applicant to withdraw certainly prior to the vote. So that's it, Mr. Chairman, for the day on the agenda.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you all.
This was a big